Hello and welcome to this video. On this video, I'm going to be going through what I think are the greatest triple albums ever made. The 10 greatest triple albums of all time, ranked from 10 to 1. Now, there's a couple of choices that haven't made this list. The triple album that accompanied the film The Last Waltz will not be here because I hate that album, and although many other people should say it should be here, I'm not going to put it here. I'm very aware of it. I can remember sitting through that film as a younger man and being bored stiff and completely made brain numb by the sort of innocuous banality of the music on there. I don't get it. I think actually the film Last Waltz, I can remember sitting up one night waiting for another concert to come on. I can't remember what it was. It's probably Genesis. I feel it was a Genesis concert. And before that concert came on, I had to watch The Last Waltz. And so I sat through this film and I just wanted it to be over. And I think the artists were so boring in there that it gave me a dislike to many of the artists featured in that film. In fact, if you go through many of the artists I don't seem to have that much time for, they're always in The Last Waltz. Right, so that won't be here. Another album by an artist I really love that won't be here will be Thingfish by Frank Zappa. I own it. I quite like it, but it's not good enough to make the top 10. And I'm sure there's a few others that I've forgotten, so you can put those in the comments. But I think, for me at least, I think these are the greatest, the 10 greatest triple albums, and I think all of them are better than The Last Waltz and Thingfish, and that's the way I work it out, you see. So shall we just kick straight in at number 10, right at the bottom? Although a very, very good album, but an album I think that's a little bit underrated. At 10, I have this, Emancipation by Prince. This came out in 1996, 30 years ago, right? It's an important album in the history of Prince because it was his first album once he got out of his contract with Warner Brothers. A triple album to do with trying to get out of a contract with Warner Brothers. This is going to crop up again on this video, believe it or not. We're going to have two cases of a triple album being linked to Warner Brothers in negative terms, but we'll get there in a bit. And I'm sure those of you who have, the music knowledge required to appreciate my channel will know exactly what I'm talking about. So Prince, one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, incredible songwriter, an incredible singer, multi-instrumentalist, a good guitar player, not as good as people think, as I've said elsewhere. His glory period was in the mid-80s after he made the film Purple Rain, and that soundtrack went ballistic, almost being like his Thriller. He followed it up with masterpiece after masterpiece, whether it be Parade, Sign of the Times, the Love Sexy album. They're all incredible albums. Being a creative musician, he wanted to do more than just be the pop star. And so he started to get into a situation with Warner Brothers. He decides to get out of that contract. And he makes it as difficult for them as he possibly can. He stops calling himself Prince and he names himself after this symbol, this sort of pansexual sort of male and female and slightly pagan symbol here. And he started to go around with the word slave written on his face and make, albums of, some would say, a substandard to get out of his contract. The last album he made for Warner Brothers was an album called Chaos and Disorder. It didn't sell well and it wasn't received well. It's seen as a great failure and will often crop up on the worst of lists. This is the worst album ever made, and it's not. It's a good album. It showcases Prince's rockier side. But I like that album. But this was a big deal because in 1996 he's out of his contract. He set his own label up, which was called NPG Records, NPG standing for New Power Generation, which was the name of his band at the time. And he releases a triple album. Now, this album wasn't a mega success, but it did come out and sell 500,000 copies, which is a reasonable amount. And I went out and bought it, quite excited. I can remember once I got it home, it really was a lot of stuff to get through. Prince had almost had this explosion of all the things that he couldn't do with Warner Brothers. Now, what was that? Well, the main thing you notice on here is there's a few cover versions on here. Most notably, the Joan Osborne song "Two of Us," which he changed the lyrics for. So, why did he want to get out of his contract? I was expecting him to do some sort of orchestral thing, or maybe a jazz fusion soundtrack, become more esoteric, more musical, but he doesn't. It's basically a triple album full of lots and lots of Prince songs, and they're all very good. The thing is here is this album is the last album I bought by Prince. After that, he seems to go into a netherworld, and the next thing he was releasing albums on the cover of newspapers, and none of these albums I really got. He sort of just disappeared from view, still doing lots of live gigs. So this was his last great gasp for me. But it's a very, very good album. There's some great bass playing on here. I don't know what more to say about this, really. What we can do on this, though, is have a look at the packaging, because it's quite interesting in this era of, streaming and downloading to be able to examine the packaging. Of course, this is a triple CD, which are always a bit difficult. We've got a CD in here, and then we've got the booklet here. And then when we open the back here, we get two more CDs, right? This is quite rare because it's a triple album, a triple studio album. I think that's something that I've had to include live albums on here, or there just wouldn't be a list. I think the cover's awful. I don't think that did it any good favours. This was that era when Photoshop had really kicked in, and everybody was really enamoured by it, and you get awful things like that. Obviously, it's called Emancipation. We have the fists, up in the air. He's left Warner Brothers. He's out. We get the obligatory lightning, and him with the old Prince there with the slave written on his face. We've got the fist on the back. He's dressed like a nun. And quite an extensive booklet with lots of crimes against Photoshops in here. Lots of badly cut out stuff. Where it's been badly cut out is that it's been sort of faded in. It's quite awful, really. And we get all the tracks, Jam of the Year, right back here in my arms, Somebody. I mean, it's a good album. This really is a testament to how many there aren't that many great triple albums. It's not a form that has really taken off commercially. But there's a lot of, So you're at number 10. I think it's a good, solid album. I haven't listened to it for a few years now. I'm going to stick this in the car now and have a listen to it, which I probably should have done before I did this video. But I tell you, I was searching far and wide for triple albums. Anyway, shall we move over to number 9, the live album. Now, I think this is a pretty important release. At number 9, I have How the West Was Won by Led Zeppelin. Now, those of us who are huge Led Zeppelin fans know that there's something not quite right with Song Remains the Same. So the Song Remains the Same sits there as their sort of live album, but it's nothing like Made in Japan. Deep Purple nailed it there. Led Zeppelin in their lifetime never really came out with a decent live album. But of course, many, many gigs were recorded. The legendary Royal Albert Hall concert in 1970, where they played incredibly, but obviously 1970 only had 2 albums to draw upon. That eventually, got released as part of the Led Zeppelin DVD. Now, Led Zeppelin were at their peak in 1973 when Song Remains the Same was filmed. And that was the point when they were the biggest band on earth. And a whole bunch of recordings did exist. Back in, when would it have been? Around about 2003, with the release of the Led Zepp DVD and a few other items, with Jimmy Page now really the helm of sort of going through all these different recordings, their own, desk recordings, bootlegs. And I was playing with Robert in 2000, and I can remember Jimmy was actually, going to see various bootleggers or bootleg collectors to really pull together everything that they had. And this album was pulled together, which comes from a couple of tours back in 1973. And this is, for me, the definitive Led Zeppelin live album. There is a double album that came out of the BBC sessions, and that's got a couple of concerts on as well. And in my mind, I sort of almost attach that to this, which would make this a quintuple album. But this is monumental. The sound is great. We get everything on here. Immigrant Song, Heartbreaker, Black Dog, Over the Hills Far Away, Since I've Been Loving You, Stairway to Heaven, Going to California, That's the Way, Bronny a Stomp. We get a 25-minute Dazed to Confused, What Is and What Should Never Be, Dancing Days. We get a 20-minute Moby Dick, Nobody Wants That. We get a 23-minute Whole Lot of Love, right? And we get a 9-minute Bring It On Home. This is the packaging. Came in a pretty cool... better than the Prince one, although it's going to fall apart as I try and open it. There we go. There's the 3 discs. Not that much information with this, to be honest. This is what Jimmy Page has written on the back. While I was searching through the archives for visual and audio material for Led Zeppelin DVD, I rediscovered these 1972 performances. Sorry, so I got the year wrong. From the 25th of June, LA Forum, and 27th of June, Long Beach Arena. This is Led Zeppelin at its best, and the illustration of how the West was won. And I agree. Led Zeppelin weren't always the brilliant live act. This is a myth. A lot of the time they had substance issues, where Jimmy Page would be staggering around the stage, inebriated, let us say. They would play for too long. All sorts of things would be going on. So not every gig was brilliant, but many were. And I think when Led Zeppelin were on, they were one of the greatest rock bands of all time. It's incredible that this is pulled from just 2 concerts. All right, I think that's a testament to how great they were. And we haven't got a whole tour where they just cherry-picked, like Rush Exit Stage Left. There's none of that going on. This is raw Zeppelin live. It's a great sound. There's no editing. There's none of this sort of let's pretend to do it later on in the sound stage like they did with Song Remains the Same and all this nonsense and overdubbing and editing that happened there. This is the real deal. So that's what I've got at number 9 is How the West Was Won. Now, some bands in the 70s, especially those who had very long songs, they did release triple live albums. And I got a few here. I think I got the best of them here. Now, I bought this when I was a youngster. I was very impressed with the cover, but it never really floated my boat, and I was mad on this band. And so I went and sold this album, and being a triple album, it's quite, I got a reasonable amount for it, and I was able to go and buy some jazz rock albums. A lot of my, heavy rock and prog albums were sold in second-hand shops for jazz rock albums. I wish I could remember what this album was sold for, but recently I felt the need to go and get it back. So I bought this at a record fair quite recently. There it is, Yessongs. Now, this is great, but I feel that with this album, there's a couple of things that niggle me about it, which is why it's not higher on the list. All these albums are great and I love them, but I'm just telling you why they're a little bit lower down for these albums. With this album, I always felt the production wasn't that great. It was a bit muffly and woolly, basically, a little bit roomy as well, a little bit sort of echoey, but we've got a brilliant selection of tracks. If you wanted to create a triple album best of Yes, this would be incredible. Siberian Cart, True Heart of the Sunrise, Perpetual Change, and You and I, Mood for a Day, excerpts from The Six Wives of Henry VIII. Oh, that's an extra thing. Roundabout, Your Move, I've Seen All Good People, Long Distance Run Around, The Fish, Close to the Edge, Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship Trooper. Now, on Perpetual Change, Long Distance Run Around and The Fish, we get Bill Bruford on drums. But Bill seems to have jumped ship at some point. And Alan White's been very quickly drafted in. Alan White, I think, had a baptism by fire because A, he had to join Yes and learn all this stuff to get out on tour, and then have to go straight into the studio and do the drumming to Tales from Topographic Oceans. Another issue I have with prog bands live is not every prog band's like this, but in the case of Yes, most of the time they're playing the track exactly like the album. So when you listen to Close to the Edge on here, it's pretty much like the studio album, but with, you know, a bit of clapping on and venue sound on there. And I find that a little bit pointless. There are certain points here where Steve Howe really goes for it. We get a Bill Bruford solo. Those are always my favourite bits. Now let's have a look at the album cover, because if we were ranking the greatest triple album covers, well, this might not make number one, but it'd definitely be in the top two. There's another one I need to tell you about. It's on the list. But look at this. It's a Roger Dean overload. Look at that. And I love how sparse it is. You expect the detail, but no, they use the space. And I used to love that. I used to love that painting when I was a kid. You know, absolutely incredible. Whoa, look at that. Absolutely incredible. We get the liner notes, which are inside as a little booklet, really. Now, I think my copy that I bought in the 1980s, it didn't have this in. I think they got rid of this at a late date. But there's lots of photographs. We get a photograph of the crew. We get a photograph of Eddie Offord. It's an incredibly lush release, and that's why I bought it again, because I think if you're a Yes fan, and I am a huge Yes fan, it's essential. I mean, look at Rick there. Look at this. This is so prog, isn't it? It's so prog. So yeah, this is Yessongs by Yes, and I think we're at that was number 8, wasn't it? Yes. Anything else I could show you here? Or is that it? Yeah. So there it is again. Now, I didn't plan to just pick albums that I owned. I did this objectively and came up with a list. I happen to own all the albums except for one. And it's an album I wish I did own, because I think it's better than Yessongs, and I think it's very exemplary of this group. So in its place, I've put that there, another live album by the same band, just to remind me. So that's Pictures of an Exhibition. That's why that's there. But you will be getting now, over in this bit, a picture of the album Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends. I'm so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. I don't think that's the full title, but it's a pretty long title anyway. ELP were one of the biggest bands in the 1970s, and at this point in 1974, they were moving on to being one of the biggest bands. They'd played the California Jam along with Deep Purple and Black Sabbath in 1974. They were one of the acts, and they had a sort of a live show to rival Kiss. You know, this was rock and roll at its most bombastic. The live album, unlike Yessongs, expands on all the material. Most of the material on this album is pulled from Brain Salad Surgery, which many people think is one of their greatest albums, and I think it is a great album. But I do feel on this album, they take those tunes and then just explode them from the inside. And it's almost like you don't quite understand those tunes unless you go and listen to the live album. This is even more the case with the tune Tarkus, which they also expand on and make much more bombastic. And so this exists almost like Made in Japan does for Deep Purple. You could almost see these as being the versions. There's not that much from Trilogy, which I think is another of their greatest albums, perhaps their greatest albums. I think because Trilogy was so overdubbed in its creation. We get, what else is on there? They did do a recording at Pictures of an Exhibition. I don't know whether it's on that album. I can't remember, to be honest. It's been a long time since I heard it. I did have it in the old days on cassette, or actually on 2 cassettes. So I do know the album reasonably well. ELP were a showboating band, and live is where you need to see them. With Yes, it was a different thing. I think Yes were much more of a studio band, and that's quite an interesting observation when you start to look at these albums. Anyway, so that's what I've got at number 7. So we're now at number 6. That's right, we're at number 6. Another album where the cover is quite incredible. I don't think we sort of have a few live albums. Well, albums with live tracks on. But this could well be the greatest triple live album ever made. And I believe it's a high point for this band. And many people watching this channel will say, yeah, this is the greatest moment for that band. At number 6, I've got Santana Lotus. An incredible album, which covers their period from the early sort of crossover of hard rock and Latin American music that had been so successful on the debut album, and then on Abraxas, and then Santana 3. But then we know after Santana 3, I don't know what I call them Santana for, after Santana 3, they change, don't they? And they turn into one of the heaviest jazz rock fusion bands on the planet. But they're still Santana, so these albums are still selling millions of copies. And so the run of albums that they do then, which would be Caravanserai, Läther, and Welcome, are for me some of the greatest jazz rock fusion albums from the classic jazz rock fusion period, and some of the biggest selling albums from that period. By 1973-74, they've got an incredible band, including the mighty and the, I'm afraid, forgotten great of the 1970s, the bassist Doug Rausch, who I believe is one of the most important bassists in the history of the bass, who died in 1978 from a drugs overdose and has sort of been a little bit forgotten in the pantheon of Stanley Clarke's and Jaco Pastorius's. So this is a brilliant example of Doug Rausch. Now, the album cover, and mine is so beat up now that when I pulled it out this morning, I thought it might be time for me to go and buy another one of these, I think. And I ain't going to buy it on CD. It's got to be on vinyl. I have to own it in this sort of form. I'm going to try and open it up for you, and I know I'm going to get, this is even more epic than Yessongs, right? So we got bits falling off it now. I think the basic album is this. We've got the 3 discs here, all with Santana Lotus in a what's-its, you see. There's the 3 discs. Let's show them you. When I came through this video this morning, I thought, I'll do this video, I'll do it quite straight. I won't put that many jokes in. I know the jokes, I won't need to put jokes in this one because I know I'm going to be trying to open Lotus, and I knew that would be quite comedic. Doesn't that look amazing? I mean, that was when bloody albums were worth buying, wasn't it? But this came with it, and it was sort of folded in, and this opens out into... That's a bit of the album, you see. This is ripped off at some point. Yeah, that held one of the discs. And then inside that you had this incredible... I'll have to get up and move around for this. Triple albums. It's nearly as big as me. We've got all this going on in the background. Now this stuff here is by an artist, I believe. I think it was a Japanese artist called Tadanori. Great artist who did a lot of sort of... He came out of sort of the pop art era, if I'm right. But this is a mighty album, and it captures one of the great jazz fusion bands playing live, improvising, playing their arses off, as Americans would say, over 6 sides. It's pretty heavy. And I do believe that, is it Incident at Nescabar? which was originally on Abraxas, ends up occupying a whole side. Which side would it be? There we go. So that is record 3, side B. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, side 4. Quite incredible. We get all the favourites on here as well. You know, there's all Black Magic Woman. They do all that. But there's a lot of incredible stuff. Mantra, incredible. Yes. So that's what I've got at number 6, was it? So we're now going to move to number 5. Now, this is unheard of in the history of my top 10s. The next 3 albums are all by the same artist. And I believe he's the only artist that really understood the triple album. And that is, of course, Frank Zappa. I mentioned Thingfish earlier on and, made the point that it's not that great. I like it. Thingfish was a sort of rock opera that Frank Zappa wrote, which explores that area between sort of Broadway musicals, racism in sort of the minstrel sort of entertainment industry and how that relates to that. And then the idea that AIDS had been created in a lab, and it pulls all that together. Almost creating these sort of Frankenstein monsters called the Mammy Nuns, which I also think have a nod to Sound of Music. It's a very outlandish concept to run over 3 hours, and most of it is Terry Bozzio and Dale Bozzio, who were married at the time, sort of watching this musical show. Which involves all sorts of depravity. With at one point, the Mammy Nuns, I believe, urinate on Terry Bozzio and Dale Bozzio. They're not happy at all. So I have to mention Thingfish, and I wanted to put it on the list. It was created by taking a lot of Frank's other tunes and sort of overdubbing into them and rewriting the lyrics. And there's a lot of sort of not the sort of production values you'd expect from a Zappa album. But it's coherent over 3 sides, and Zappa could do that. So, at number 5, I have what I think is one of the greatest jazz fusion albums of all time. This is a cornerstone to any musician who is interested in how to improvise at high volume, with guitarists rather than playing sort of small, hard bop style jazz sort of music that we love here. This album is as important as Bitches Brew. It's important as A Love Supreme to me. It's important as the early Mahavishnu Orchestra albums, or Weather Report. This is up there, and it is the triple album Shut Up and Play Your Guitar. Now this is basically, it sounds like it shouldn't work. It's a collection of guitar solos, often guitar solos on other tunes, where Zappa has taken the guitar solo, pulled it out of that tune and renamed it as a new track. He has then edited these together with these sort of music concrete, lumpy gravy-esque, spoken word, noisy sort of edits in between each guitar solo, which I absolutely love, and I wish he'd done on the album Guitar, the double album that came out in the late 80s, which is also really great. But that album doesn't have Vinnie Colaiuta on it. This album has Vinnie Colaiuta, and Vinnie here is exploring an area of rhythmical improvisation alongside Zappa, which for me rewrote the book. It's so important. Zappa's guitar playing is almost architectural. Zappa can do a 5 to 10 minute guitar solo and hold your interest. If you're listening to this about guitar solos, chops can't hold your interest. They're not going to hold your interest. It's not about that. And Zappa's strange technique, which all often gets perceived by people who love sort of chopsy technical guitar playing as being scruffy and messy, is actually the fact that he has a much wider vocabulary in terms of sounds. And he explores those and he utilises those in a really interesting way, creating guitar solos which have to be listened over a long time, because he creates these like almost like balance points, you know. It's like he's creating some weird Calder mobile, you know, and he's holding the string up and go, I'll have this bit here and I'll have a little bit right over here, the right bit, and then when he's got it all balanced, it all works. I think it's a work of art. I think Zappa's guitar playing here is incredible. He has that sort of penchant for exploring dirty blues that he got from people like Johnny Guitar Watts and Guitar Slim, but he also has this sort of abstract sound thing going on, and most impressive for me, a real exploration of modes, and not just major modes, but he gets into it all sort of synthetic scales. It's so advanced, and people don't realise it. It's an incredible album. It was originally released as a mail order box set, and each album was titled separately. So you had Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, then you had Shut Up and Play Your Guitar Some More, and then The Return of the Son of Shut Up and Play Your Guitar. I absolutely love this album, and this is one of those albums, if I put it on, it's staying there for a month. I know this will seem really strange for most normal people that might find this quite a difficult listen, but for me, the emotional intensity of the improvisations is unsurpassed. It really is one of the great jazz albums of all time. There, I said it. It's not jazz, Andy. We know what jazz is. We're gatekeepers, and it's not jazz. It's something else. Right. So, a little bit like Prince, 20 years later, in the mid-70s, Zappa had got fed up with his contract with Warner Brothers, and he wanted to bring out a triple album, and they wouldn't do it. And so he got so miffed with the fact they wouldn't bring this triple album out that he went down to the radio, local radio, and he says, Warner Brothers won't let me release this album, so I'm going to play it now. Get all your cassette tapes and record it. So they basically ordered his fan base to bootleg it, and he was bootlegged. Now, what Warner Brothers did was, it was released from his contract. He went off and formed his own record label called Barking Pumpkin, and they released this material that he had been recording for this one album over 4 albums. Those albums being Zappa in New York, which is how the live stuff was released, Orchestral Favourites, which is how the orchestral stuff was released, and then the rest of the sort of band stuff was divided in the more sort of proggier Zappa compositional approach, which was Studio Tan, and the more jazz fusiony stuff, which was Sleep Dirt. Now, these 4 albums are 4 of the greatest Zappa albums, and I love those albums, and I believe that Studio Tan and Sleep Dirt are amongst his greatest albums. He didn't oversee them. He didn't oversee the running order. He didn't oversee the artwork. They got this guy called Gary Panter in to do the artwork, but the artwork's great. Not so much for Zappa in New York, but for the 3 others, the artwork's great. They're iconic and they're incredible albums, and that's what I grew up with. Later on, when Zappa got hold of his catalogue, he did re-release those albums, so he didn't shelve them. He re-released those albums, but with additional vocals, and it wasn't as good. Spider of Destiny, we didn't need the vocal, Frank. But in 1997, actually 1996, as I look down, I think he'd prepared this before he died. He died in 1993, but basically, this was reconstituted back to the triple album it was originally going to be. So we have this album, which looks like it's called Läther, but it's actually pronounced Leather, and it brings all this stuff together. Now, this is one of the most monumental albums ever made, but it never was released. I'm pretty sure if it was released back in 76, 77, this would be Zappa's masterpiece, and anybody who was considering his discography would be working around this. This is monumental. And when you bring all the stuff back together, the orchestral stuff, all these sort of fusiony stuff, and then these is also edited together in that lumpy gravy type of style, which Zappa had returned to at this point. I don't know if you remember, but Shake Your Booty also is pulled together with the same sort of approach. These are all incredible. Egyptian Strut opens up the album, as it should. It's a fanfare, and it takes us into naval aviation art, one of his short orchestral pieces, one of his most beautiful orchestral pieces. And then we get a little green Rosetta, which didn't appear on any of the albums I just mentioned and actually surfaced as a sort of climax to Joe's Garage. More of that in a minute. Duck Down Goose guitar solo, Down the Dew guitar solo for the Young Sophisticate, another track that appears on Shake Your Booty, Trying to Go a Chin. I think that is on Shake Your Booty. Broken Hearts and For Our Souls is Shake Your Booty. So we see that Shake Your Booty as well, I didn't realise, so much of this came out off the back of that album. We get The Legend of the Illinois Enema Bandit, which is from Zappa in New York, one of these sort of folklore tunes, a bit like Stagger Lee that you have, where Zappa will sing about a cowboy, going across the fields of Montana, and instead of herding cows, he's herding dental floss. And this tells the story of a man going around college campus, a little bit like Ted Bundy, but in this case, giving them just an enema. An experience which would be unpleasant, but nothing as bad as Ted Bundy. Let Me Take You to the Beach is one of these sort of kitsch, Ruben the Jets type of things, one of my favourite Zappa tunes of all time. Revised music for guitar and low-budget orchestra is another version of the tune that he wrote for Jean-Luc Ponty that appears on King Kong. He then takes the place of the sort of central concerto voice, Zappa on guitar. And then we get the incredible Redunzel, one of Zappa's great compositions. That's disc 1. That is magnificent. Disc 2, Honey, Don't You Want a Man Like Me from Zappa in New York. The Black Page, number 1. This is where the Black Page should have been. Big Leg Emma, again, another sort of Ruben the Gents doo-woppy type of thing. Punky's Whips from Zappa in New York with the famous story of Terry Bozzio's love for the guitarist of Angel, Punky Meadows. We got Flambe, and then the 16-minute Purple Lagoon, which is a live jazz rock workout with one of the most incredible saxophone solos from Michael Brecker. Why am I doing this all? Because I'm trying to get across to you how insane this album would have been if it had come out at the time. Pedro's Dowry, one of the great orchestral pieces by Zappa. We get Läther, which I think is a guitar solo. Spider of Destiny, and then the Duke of Orchestral Prunes, which is a reworking of the Mother's track. Then we get Filthy Habits on disc 3, Titties and Beer. The Ocean is the Ultimate Solution, incredible jazz rock workshop there. And then it finishes with the 20-minute Gregory Peccary, probably Zappa's most incredible recorded moment. 20 minutes of, I ain't even going to try to explain to you. And then you get a few extra things. We get a 1993 version of Egyptian Strut, and then a few other extras here. Leather Goods, Revenge of the Knick-Knack People, and also Time is Money, which I believe is on either Sleep Dirt or Studio Town. So I haven't got everything absolutely accurate, but you can see this is a mighty album, right? But at number 3, I have this. I put it higher. Joe's Garage, another triple album. Now, this is pushing it really, because originally when this came out, it was a single album followed up by a double album. You had Act 1 come out and then Acts 2 and 3 come out. And they were markedly different. Act 1 was a very punchy Zappa album, very entertaining, funny, whereas Acts 2 and 3 had a lot more extended guitar improvisation with Vinny on drums, right? Then later on, in the, I would say, late 80s, they brought this box set out, which I bought. This is what I've got here, and it's really on its last legs now. Now you'll get it on CD. Let's just dive into it, because what we get here is this booklet. Incredible. Sort of artwork, the story, the lyrics. And what is the story on this album? Because it's a little bit like a rock opera. It's came out in 1979, same year as The Wall, right? I'm not a big fan of The Wall. My wall is Joe's Garage. I absolutely love this album. Record 1, Central Scrutiny, There's Joe's Garage, Catholic Girls, Crew Slut, Wet T-Shirt Night, Toad Line, Why Does It Hurt When I Pee, Lucille Has Messed My Mind Up. This is some of the most accessible Zappa you're ever going to listen to. Funny, interesting, tells a story of this guy in a band, and he's got a girlfriend, he goes out on tour and meets a sort of... no, he hasn't got a girlfriend, does he? He goes out on tour and he meets these sort of groupies, basically, and after a liaison all around this sort of Wet T-shirt night, he ends up contracting some sort of disease. Hence, Why Does It Hurt When I Pee? And then he sings this sort of lament, this sort of reggae lament, Lucille Has Messed My Mind Up, an actually beautiful tune. But this is really accessible. This is a good place to start with Frank Zappa, as long as you don't get offended by the offensive. But side 2 breaks down into a much more weirder stuff, a token of his extreme, Stick It Out, Cyborg. It's all about robot sex and prisons and incarceration and the government, overseeing what you're doing and controlling you. I mean, it's all about, a dystopian future, which we actually live in now. And Frank Zappa predicted it here. And this guy that wanted to be a guitar player goes on this big thing, ends up in prison for saying the wrong thing. He gets raped by a robot. There's all sorts of things go on on this, and he eventually ends up a sort of mindless moron. Squirting a little green rosetta on the top of a cupcake, I believe, and it says a lovely ode to mass production. A little green rosetta. It has Watermelon Easter Hay, which is one of Zappa's most beautiful tunes and one of his greatest guitar solos. Keep It Greasy is the Bible of how to play odd time signatures, as Vinnie Colaiuta just owns 1916 and 2116. This is all incredible stuff. The production's incredible. The drum sound's incredible. This is one of Zappa's greatest moments, and I always sort of forget it because I love it so much. It almost occupies its own space. I've got it up at number 3. For me, this album is pretty much perfect, right? It's a Zappa album, and the deeper you get into it, in the middle of it, you do seem lost. Where the hell am I? You could say it rambles on. It's a bit incoherent in the middle. It's an accusation of many Triple albums, but this sort of incoherence I love, and it comes back. It's got a lampoon of Al Di Meola with Warren Cucurullo doing his Al Di Meola impersonation. It's just this is monumental. And if you're a Vinnie Colaiuta fan, which I am, this is essential. It's probably the most essential. This and Secrets by Alan Holdsworth. So what could possibly surpass Frank Zappa, who was here, proved that he's the king of the Triple album, with 3 albums on this list? Well, I've got 2 masterpieces. At number 2, I've got this behemoth, The Escalator Over the Hill, by Carla Bley and Paul Haynes. Yes, a studio Triple album. This took about 3 years to make. And there we have the contributing musicians to this weird jazz rock opera before jazz rock was a thing. You could argue that Carla Bley invents jazz rock on this album, but we'll get to this. Side 1, Hotel Overture, which is a 13-minute sort of free jazz overture, very much like the stuff that appeared on the Jazz Composers Orchestra album. We've got Roswell Rudd, Perry Robinson on clarinet, Gato Barbieri on tenor sax, and Charlie Hayden on bass. They're the soloists. The band is made up of people like Michael Mantler, Jimmy Nepper. We've got it's Paul Motion on drums. It's heavyweight. Then side 2, the story starts up, which was written by Paul Haynes. It's a very strange story, which I think is probably best for me not to relate. But we do get a libretto here with this album. And if you don't know this album, you're thinking, what the hell's this album Andy's thrown out? Yeah, this should be an album that everybody knows, Escalator Over the Hill, and we get the libretto here. And we've got like a script for a musical. Voice, whatever it is. MPM, which is the multiple public members. Oh, Voice, can't have a name. Multiple public members. Lord, since it makes no difference what you call it. Voice and members. Edgar, it's all bizarre. So late there is light at the edge of the lake. Bullfrogs are having their throats cut. You pick histers, hysterically at your memory. It's just out there and trippy. And within this, we have a number of bands, and the bands almost are characters in this story. And one of the bands is, it's called the something Hotel Lobby Band. Let's see if I can find it on here. So, Jack's Travelling Band, that's the one. Jack's Travelling Band is Paul Motion on drums, the great drummer with the Bill Evans trio. Jack Bruce on bass. Carla Blake on piano and organ. And John McLaughlin on electric guitar. And on Rawalpindi Blues, which is almost 13 minutes long, which this is recorded in 1970. They do more on that than the Tony Williams Lifetime did, or Jack Johnson ever did to invent jazz rock fusion. It could well have been invented here. The other musicians on this album, it just goes on and on and on. I don't know, I'm not going to... I don't want to keep going on about it. It's an incredible album. It's an absolute masterpiece. It's strange. It's difficult. The production's a little bit tinny. I would love someone to find the master tapes or get it into AI and actually really bring out the vastness of this album. So you really feel the huge orchestras involved in it and the sort of free jazz, free group soloing, which you get across multiple, free jazz legends involved in this. This is incredible. So that's what I've got at number 2. Right. Number 1, when I started on this list, I hadn't even considered this for the list, to be honest. And I knew there was a couple of albums that I knew I would reject, me being such a jazz fan, a Zappa fan. And I knew there was one album that any normal person would put at number 1. And I'd heard it, and I knew it was a great album, but I decided to sit down. I put the headphones on, and I was absolutely floored. It is the greatest triple album ever made, and that, of course, is the monumental, epic, legendary All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. See what I've done with all this Zappa stuff and jazz rock and all the stuff I love and all the prog and yes and everything. That in the end, I know that the greatest album of all of these is this one here. All Things Must Pass. This is a beautiful album. Now, what can I say about this? It's produced by Phil Spector. It's got all sorts of guest musicians on, and nobody's quite sure who's on what. The first 2 discs contain some incredible songs by George Harrison. And the last disc is actually a bunch of instrumental jams, which I absolutely loved. And I thought, this doesn't exist anywhere else. I love improvised music, right? But you don't have to be a jazz musician to make improvised music. You don't have to be. And this is a sort of textbook, a great example of what musicians do when they get in a room together. And I found this stuff very enjoyable to listen to, which is what music's about. I thought, yeah, there's all these great songs, there's all the lyrics and everything that George Harrison is trying to get across, and that's great. All the stuff that makes songwriting great as opposed to instrumental music. But to have a disc of instrumental music, which doesn't pull on the blues particularly, and doesn't pull on jazz particularly, although we have Eric Clapton soloing beautifully on it, but actually creates its own little... I really think this is an incredible album. The lineup, have we got a lineup even in here? This is what is a mystery, is who actually bloody plays on this. No, I have checked it out. Who is on here? Jim Gordon on drums. Ginger Baker's on drums. Clapton's on here. Why do we not get a lineup anywhere here? This is the mystery of this album, is who the hell is on it. It's over on Wikipedia if you want to check it out. I really wish I had the sort of memory to be able to pull that out. We've got notes here. Oh, I found it, so we can go through it. So, produced by George Harrison and Phil Spector. I'm not a big fan of Phil Spector as a producer, but here it works. These songs, which are actually quite simple, not the sort of complex things that George Harrison offered to the Beatles, like Here Comes the Sun. This is much more spacey and conceptual. And so that space is filled out by the sort of echoey soundscapes created by Phil Spector's production approach. On drums, yes, we've got Jim Gordon, Alan White and Ginger Baker and Ringo Starr. The bass is played by Klaus Vormann or Carl Radl. Keyboards, Gary Wright, Bobby Whitlock, Billy Preston, Gary Brooker. These are a lot of musicians that seem to be playing around the sort of Clapton circle at that time. On pedal steel guitar, we've got Peter Drake. Guitar is George Harrison, Eric Clapton and Dave Mason from Traffic. Tenor saxophone is Bobby Keys. Trumpets, Jimmy Price. It says rhythm, guitars and percussion, Badfinger. Now, Badfinger is a band I have never mentioned in 1,500 videos here. Badfinger were the sort of Beatles that, the bad luck Beatles. And my God, did they have some bad luck. Now, I played in a band called Freedom to Glide. And Andy, the main guy in that band, Andy Nixon, he also has a link with Badfinger. He plays with those guys. And he was always talking to me about this Badfinger album that's never seen the light of day that they were about to release. If there's an interest in Badfinger, I can get him on to talk about the whole story, because it is the most depressing, unluckiest story of any band in rock. Acoustic guitar on My Sweet Lord is Darnie Harrison, which is his son. This has been done afterwards on this sort of box set. And we've got additional backing vocals from Sam Brown, who's the daughter of Joe Brown, who would have been basically very little or not even born at that point. It was engineered by the great Ken Scott, who I met down at Abbey Road when I did the Rick Beato. This is historic. It's incredible. Why is it so good? Why is it the greatest? Come on, let's be honest. Why is this the greatest? I've lost a disc here. Have I lost a disc? One. I've lost it. It's only got 2 discs, hasn't it? It's a triple album. It's only got 2 discs. I got a bit worried then. George Harrison was always elbowed out of the Beatles, and he's a formidable songwriter. When I listen to Beatles albums, all the songwriters are incredible, but often the songs that astonish me are George Harrison's songs. How do you work this out? You know, was it that the Beatles happened to have 2 genius songwriters in Lennon and McCartney, both genius songwriters, and then their rhythm guitarist, who wasn't allowed to write that many songs, was also a genius songwriter? Or did it just rub off? Were they just kids that were copying each other? And in that sort of male competitive space, it was like, who could become the best songwriter? I don't know. It almost wants a video all to itself, that. But they elbowed him out, didn't they? And he sort of wasn't happy. And so he built up not just a whole bunch of songs, but he built up the need to write songs and be the songwriter, which he does on this album. I've got to be honest, after this, he never really did it again. This is a one-off. It was a huge success when it came out. It was perhaps the greatest solo album by ex-Beatle, but also it was very close to the demise of the Beatles. So this coming out, can you imagine a triple album coming out at that time when the Beatles are no more? Because this comes out sort of 71, is it? I think it's like virtually on top. And he delivers the goods. It's an incredible album. It's more rocky than I thought, and more psychedelic as well. It's just fantastic. Anyway, I've managed to get through that list in a true Edwards style. A little bit chaotic that one was, wasn't it? But we've done it. So what do you think? Did I miss anything off the list? I'm sure I did with this one. But there can't be that many. I mean, if you guys get in the comments and start to throw some other stuff in, we might be able to get to the totality The problem with this is that, you know, do you consider like releases now, because there's so many triple box sets. I mean, people are bringing out Dark Side of the Moon over about 300 discs, aren't we? No, that's not true. It's an exaggeration. I know the proggers that they pricked up their ears. What, there's a 300 disc box set of Dark Side of the Moon? Oh, so I suppose I better remortgage the house then, you know. So it's a difficult one where you draw a line on what you class as a triple album. Those are all the things that I feel like I've dealt with on this album. The only thing that's niggling me here at the end of the video is I did have one fact that I always have a few facts and I forgot to say it. So can I say it now at the end of the video? So my fact was that I never managed to get at the time, but forgot about it, is the fact that on Emancipation by Prince, Kate Bush did some of the backing vocals on there. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Kate doing that. I think he'd sung, did Prince appear on that Red Shoes album? Maybe they did it tit for tat. I don't know which one was tit and what one was tat. I can imagine.